I shadowed my family for years, paying their bills and swallowing their ridicule. At my birthday party, my sister dropped a cruel joke, and my family only laughed. I broke their financial bondage with 2 taps on the phone. My name's Ethan Wilson. I'm 38, living in a Chicago suburb in an old brick house on Lakeview, where the walls are thin and the neighbors are loud. My apartment's a 1-bedroom, stuffed with programming books, a beat-up couch, and a view of rusty fire escapes that creak in the wind. I'm a software engineer at an IT firm on Michigan Avenue, writing code for banking systems that handle millions of dollars while I sip cold coffee from a paper cup. My life's a gray treadmill. Up at 6:30, stuck in traffic on I-90, 10 hours staring at a screen, then back home to silence. Sometimes I walk in Grant Park along Lake Michigan, listening to blockchain podcasts or old Nirvana albums. No wife, no kids, not even a cat. Just family. My sister Lindsay, my mom Carol, my dad Richard, and my niece Emily. And their expectations, heavy as concrete slabs. I was never the hero of their stories. I was a shadow, the guy they called when money ran out, the car broke down, or a bill needed paying. I covered Lindsay's rent when she lost her waitress job for the 3rd time in a year. Paid off my parents' mortgage on their Evanston house when the bank started sending red-stamped letters. Bought Emily everything. Glow-in-the-dark sneakers, an $850 phone she begged for on her 13th birthday. I didn't do it for thanks. I did it because it felt right. Family was all I had. Or so I told myself. My 38th birthday started like another obligation. I ordered a $200 cake from a bakery on Clark Street, vanilla cream and berries, Emily's favorite. Got cases of wine, pizza from Lou Malnati's, streamers and balloons to deck out my parents' place. The living room buzzed with 30 people. Relatives, Lindsay's friends, neighbors who barely knew my name. Pepperoni mingled with the smell of Mom's salad, and light from cheap bulbs bounced off wine glasses. I stood in the corner by the bookshelf, holding a plastic cup of flat, warm Coke. Emily sat on the rug, tearing into shiny wrapping for a new iPhone, her pink-polished nails flashing, her eyes gleaming with greedy excitement. Lindsay sprawled on the couch, scrolling Instagram, her lips curled in her usual smirk. Mom fussed in the kitchen, arranging napkins, her movements sharp, like she was avoiding my eyes. Dad, in his faded Bears shirt, sipped beer, slouched in the leather recliner I bought them 2 years ago. Then Emily giggled, her voice cutting through the noise like a knife through butter. She glanced at Lindsay, then at me, her eyes sparkling with mischief, but something sharp, almost cruel. She said I was just an ATM, someone nobody would notice if I vanished. Lindsay snorted, not looking up from her phone, her smile sour as vinegar. Dad grunted, raising his bottle like he was toasting the truth. Mom didn't turn, but her shoulders twitched, betraying her silent agreement. Laughter rolled through the room, soft at first, like a whisper, then loud, like a pack of hyenas. Uncle Frank, who saw me once a year at Christmas, coughed into his whiskey. Aunt Marge, who always borrowed money and never paid it back, covered her mouth, but her eyes laughed. Even the neighbor, Mrs. Klein, who just stopped by, giggled, adjusting her glasses. I stood there, blood pounding in my temples. My fingers crushed the cup, plastic cracking, Coke spilling over my hand, sticky and cold. I nodded, like I always did, swallowing the humiliation like a bitter pill stuck in my throat. But something snapped inside. The room shrank, voices dulled, their faces turned alien, like masks at a carnival. I wasn't part of this anymore. I was the shadow they'd carved out of their lives, and that shadow was starting to darken. I didn't say a word, smiled, like their laughter was just a joke, and headed to the kitchen where the cake waited for its candles. My steps were heavy, like the floor was caving under me. Guests gathered around the table, their laughter still ringing in my ears like an echo of betrayal. I looked at them. Lindsay, eyes glued to her phone, nails tapping the screen like a metronome. Mom, pretending to be busy, rearranging salad spoons, her fingers trembling. Dad, cracking open his second Miller Lite, his gaze cloudy as a November lake. My hands shook, but my fingers found the phone in my jeans pocket. 2 taps. Just 2. I opened the banking app, the screen glowing in the dim kitchen, reflecting in my eyes. I cut everything off. Lindsay's credit cards she used for online shopping and Uber, her Netflix, Spotify, even the yoga classes she never attended. My parents' utilities, electricity, water, gas, the insurance on their old Ford that Dad crashed twice in a year, the internet I set up for Emily so she could stream her TikTok dances, everything I'd paid for over the years, gone in seconds. My fingers moved with purpose, like they'd been waiting for this. I didn't plan it, didn't think, just did it. Each tap was a hammer strike, breaking the chains that held me. The room hummed, candles flickered, their flames dancing in the air thick with wax and pizza. Someone started singing Happy Birthday, voices blending into a fake harmony. I looked at their faces, lit by the trembling glow, and felt a coldness grow inside, like ice locking a lake. They sang for me, but I was already a stranger. I was a shadow with a wallet they didn't notice until it was empty. Now the wallet was closed, and the shadow was moving. I left without a goodbye. Nobody noticed. I walked through the living room, past their laughter, past the cake I bought, past Emily filming stories on her new phone. The door slammed behind me, but the sound drowned in the party's noise. The cold Chicago wind hit my face, cutting through my jacket, but I breathed it in like freedom. The street was empty, only streetlights flickering, casting long shadows on the asphalt. I didn't go home. Instead, I went to my apartment, where silence greeted me like an old friend. I packed a small backpack, laptop, a couple of shirts, passport, charger. But that wasn't my baggage. I went to the closet, where an old mirror sat gathering dust, heavy in a bronze frame, its glass cracked, bought 5 years ago at a West Side flea market. The seller, an old woman with empty eyes and a voice like rustling leaves, said it sees the truth. I laughed then, thinking it was just a sales pitch. Now I wasn't laughing. I loaded the mirror into the trunk of my old Honda Civic, its edges scratching the upholstery. The night was dark, only the moon hanging over Chicago like a pale eye. I drove back to my parents' house. The living room still buzzed, laughter and voices spilling through the windows, light pooling on the lawn. Nobody saw me slip into the hallway, my sneakers squeaking on the wood floor. I left the mirror by the stairs, propped against the wall. On the glass, I taped a note, written in black marker. Look at yourselves. The letters were uneven, my hand shaking, but the words burned like coals. I left. For good. The next morning, I woke to pounding on my door, heavy and furious, like someone wanted to break it down. My heart raced, but I knew who it was. Dad. His silhouette loomed behind the frosted glass, tall, slouched, still in that sweat-soaked bear's shirt. His fists hammered the wood, each thud echoing in my chest. His voice, hoarse from whiskey and rage, demanded I open the door, threatening, cursing. He called me a traitor, ungrateful, worthless, his words like blows he never dared to land. I sat on the couch, staring out the window where Chicago's gray sky blended with the asphalt, morning fog clinging to the streetlights. I didn't move. He left after half an hour, leaving silence and the smell of gasoline from his old pickup roaring down the street. My phone blew up with messages. Mom's were short, like jabs. How could you abandon us? We're your family. Lindsay called non-stop, leaving voicemails, her voice shaking with anger, then breaking into desperation. She screamed that I'd ruined her life, that Emily was crying without internet, that I was a selfish bastard who only thought of himself. Each word was a needle, but I didn't feel the sting anymore. I watched their names flash on the screen, feeling the weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in years, I was free. I silenced the phone and tossed it on the couch, the screen still flashing, but I wasn't looking. They didn't give up. That evening, I heard a key in the lock. I froze, heart stopping for a second. Nobody should have had a key to my place. I'd given one to Lindsay 2 years ago when she temporarily crashed with me while jobless. The door swung open, and Dad stormed in, Mom trailing behind, her eyes red from crying, hair a mess. Dad was red-faced, sweat dripping down his temples, his shirt soaked like he'd run a mile. He yelled that I'd destroyed the family, that I was nothing without them, that I had to come back and fix it. His voice boomed, bouncing off the walls, but I heard a crack in it, fear he tried to hide. Mom begged, her hands trembling, reaching for me like I was her last hope. She said they didn't mean to hurt me. It was a joke. I'd misunderstood. Her voice broke, tears streamed down, but I saw panic in her eyes, not remorse. I stood by the kitchen table wiping my hair with a towel, the smell of soap lingering from my shower. I looked at them, strangers, their faces twisted in the lamplight, like masks. I told them to leave. My voice was cold, sharp, honed by years of silence. Dad stepped closer, his fist clenched, veins bulging on his neck, but I didn't flinch. He stopped, his hand hanging in the air, like he realized he couldn't hit me. Mom sobbed, her face crumpling, whispering my name like it was someone else's. They left, slamming the door, the sound echoing in the empty apartment. I knew it wasn't over. The storm was just starting. I didn't know when they'd find the mirror, but I knew they would. I felt it, like you feel a storm coming, air heavy, electricity crackling. The next day, Lindsay showed up at my office on Michigan Avenue. I saw her through the glass wall of the conference room, mid-meeting about a new project. She was pale, hair a mess, still in the same sweater from the party. Her eyes burned, arguing with the receptionist, her voice trembling with rage, cutting through the hum of the AC. She waved her arms, her bag sliding off her shoulder, unnoticed. My boss, Mark, a gruff guy in his 50s with gray temples, asked who she was. "Nobody," I said, eyes on my monitor, though my fingers froze on the keyboard. She shouted my name, her voice climbing until security escorted her out. I saw her resist, her heels slipping on the marble floor, but I didn't move. I knew she'd be back. That evening, my landlord, Joe, an old Italian with bushy brows, knocked on my door. He shifted awkwardly, fiddling with his keys. He said my family caused a scene outside, yelling that I'd abandoned them, that I had to come back. Neighbors complained. Someone called the cops. I told him to do the same if they didn't leave. Joe hesitated, his eyes darting, searching for an excuse. "But they're your family, Ethan," he mumbled. I looked at him, my gaze hard as concrete. "Not mine. Not anymore." He nodded and left, his footsteps fading in the hall. Through the window I saw a cop car pull up, Lindsay yelling at officers, her voice lost in the sirens. They left, but their shadows clung to the walls. I waited. Knew they'd find the mirror. And they did. On the third day, Lindsay texted, "What's with that damn mirror? Take it back, Ethan. This isn't funny." Her words were all caps, like a scream. I didn't reply. I pictured them standing before it, their reflections warping in the cracked glass. I knew the mirror wasn't normal. I didn't believe in supernatural stuff, but something was off about it from the start. It didn't reflect the room right. It showed more. When I looked at it at home, I saw not just myself, but shadows moving behind me, though I was alone. I thought it was exhaustion, a trick of light. Now I wasn't sure. I learned what happened from Tom, an old college friend of Lindsay's. He texted late at night, his message messy, full of typos, like his fingers were shaking. They'd put the mirror in the living room, thinking it was just my weird way of making a point. But everything changed when Mom looked into it. She screamed and stumbled back, her coffee mug shattering on the floor, shards scattering like stars. The reflection wasn't her face. It was like an old black-and-white film. She saw me wiring money to her account in 2019 when the bank threatened to take the house. Saw me paying her medical bills when she hid her diabetes from me, not wanting to burden me. Saw herself at my birthday, laughing at me, her lips mouthing words that cut like knives. He'll always pay. I didn't know when they'd find the mirror, but I knew they would. I felt it, like you feel a storm coming, air heavy, electricity crackling. The next day, Lindsay showed up at my office on Michigan Avenue. I saw her through the glass wall of the conference room, mid-meeting about a new project. She was pale, hair a mess, still in the same sweater from the party. Her eyes burned, arguing with the receptionist, her voice trembling with rage, cutting through the hum of the AC. She waved her arms, her bag sliding off her shoulder, unnoticed. My boss, Mark, a gruff guy in his 50s with gray temples, asked who she was. "Nobody," I said, eyes on my monitor, though my fingers froze on the keyboard. She shouted my name, her voice climbing until security escorted her out. I saw her resist, her heels slipping on the marble floor, but I didn't move. I knew she'd be back. That evening, my landlord, Joe, an old Italian with bushy brows, knocked on my door. He shifted awkwardly, fiddling with his keys. He said my family caused a scene outside, yelling that I'd abandoned them, that I had to come back. Neighbors complained. Someone called the cops. I told him to do the same if they didn't leave. Joe hesitated, his eyes darting, searching for an excuse. "But they're your family, Ethan," he mumbled. I looked at him, my gaze hard as concrete. "Not mine. Not anymore." He nodded and left, his footsteps fading in the hall. Through the window, I saw a cop car pull up, Lindsay yelling at officers, her voice lost in the sirens. They left, but their shadows clung to the walls. I waited. Knew they'd find the mirror. And they did. On the third day, Lindsay texted, "What's with that damn mirror? Take it back, Ethan. This isn't funny." Her words were all caps, like a scream. I didn't reply. I pictured them standing before it, their reflections warping in the cracked glass. I knew the mirror wasn't normal. I didn't believe in supernatural stuff, but something was off about it from the start. It didn't reflect the room right. It showed more. When I looked at it at home, I saw not just myself, but shadows moving behind me, though I was alone. I thought it was exhaustion, a trick of light. Now I wasn't sure. I learned what happened from Tom, an old college friend of Lindsay's. He texted late at night, his message messy, full of typos, like his fingers were shaking. They'd put the mirror in the living room, thinking it was just my weird way of making a point. But everything changed when Mom looked into it. She screamed and stumbled back, her coffee mug shattering on the floor, shards scattering like stars. The reflection wasn't her face. It was like an old black-and-white film. She saw me wiring money to her account in 2019 when the bank threatened to take the house. Saw me paying her medical bills when she hid her diabetes from me, not wanting to burden me. Saw herself at my birthday, laughing at me, her lips mouthing words that cut like knives. He'll always pay. Lindsay looked next, thinking Mom was overreacting. She froze, her face white as chalk. She saw her parties, funded by my credit cards, her car loans I paid off, her Nordstrom sprees she called essential. She saw her own words from that night. "He's just a wallet." Her reflection smiled, but it wasn't her smile, like someone else was watching from the glass. Dad refused to look, yelling it was nonsense, that I'd rigged some trick. But Emily, curious as any teenager, sneaked a peek when no one was watching. She went pale, her phone slipping from her hands, the screen cracking. She saw me buying her that iPhone, working overtime to cover her dance lessons, her Michigan summer camp. Then her own laughter, her words like poison arrows. Nobody would notice if he was gone. They tried to smash the mirror. Dad grabbed a hammer from the garage, his hands shaking, sweat pouring down his face like rain. He swung again and again, his yells mixing with the blows, but the glass didn't break. It stood like a monument to their lies, its bronze frame gleaming in the lamplight. Lindsay screamed it was a trick, that I was crazy, that I'd hired someone to scare them. Mom cried, begging to get rid of it, her voice breaking with fear, clutching her chest like she was warding off a ghost. But the mirror stayed. It became their judge, their accuser, their nightmare. Tom said they covered it with a blanket, but it didn't help. Every night they heard whispers, like the mirror was talking, reminding them of their sins. I thought that was it. I was wrong. A week later, Dad showed up again, not at my door, but in the parking lot by my office, next to my Honda Civic, gripping his pickup keys so tight his knuckles turned white. His face was gray, eyes sunken, stubble like ash on his cheeks. He didn't yell, didn't threaten. He said he wanted to talk, alone, at an old abandoned warehouse on Chicago's West Side, where he'd worked as a mechanic 20 years ago, fixing trucks for a logistics company. His voice was steady, but it had an edge, like he was holding back a storm. I knew it was a trap. But I went. Not for peace, but to see how far they'd go. Adrenaline surged through me, my heart pounding like a drum. The warehouse was empty, smelling of rust, oil, and dust that settled in my lungs. Beams creaked in the wind, windows boarded up, light slipping through cracks, striping the concrete floor like scars. Dad stood by the far wall, holding the mirror. It was smaller than I remembered, but still eerie, its bronze frame dull in the dim light. He said he knew what I'd done, that the mirror wasn't just glass, that I'd sold my soul to punish them. His eyes burned like coals, but fear hid behind his anger. I laughed, for the first time in years, not because it was funny, but because he was pathetic. He thought I was some kind of sorcerer, that I'd cursed the mirror. I stepped closer, locking eyes with him, his pupils shining with fear and rage. "You see a monster because you're scared of the truth," I said, my voice cold as Lake Michigan in winter. His hands shook, he stepped back, clutching the mirror like a shield. His breathing was heavy, like he'd run a marathon. Then I saw it. The mirror didn't show my reflection. Instead, a dark figure, a blurry silhouette, moved when I stood still. Its edges were smoky, but I felt its gaze, cold and heavy as granite. Dad saw my look and went pale, his face white as chalk. You knew," he whispered, his voice trembling like a leaf in the wind. I didn't know, but now I did. My heart pounded, but I didn't show fear. I stared at him, my gaze hard as steel. "This isn't my fight," I said and turned to leave. His scream followed me, full of rage and despair, but I didn't look back. The warehouse door slammed shut, the sound echoing in the night. I left the warehouse, but the shadow followed. I felt it, like eyes on my back. The next day, Lindsay sent a video. She was hysterical, face wet with tears, hair plastered to her cheeks like black snakes. She begged me to take the mirror, said it kept them awake, showing their sins every night. She screamed she saw not just her mistakes, but something else, a shadow standing behind her, though she was alone. Her voice broke, choking, like someone was squeezing her throat. I watched, a chill running down my spine, like a window opened in December. My apartment didn't feel like mine anymore. Shadows moved in the corners, though the lights were off. I heard whispers, low like rustling leaves, but couldn't make out words. One night I woke to the sound of cracking glass. My heart raced. I flicked on the light and checked the bathroom. The mirror where I shaved every morning had a new crack, long as a scar. In the reflection, not my face. It was Emily, eyes full of tears, but her mouth smiled, like someone else controlled it. I stumbled back, my hand hitting the sink, pain shooting through my wrist, but I couldn't look away. The reflection vanished, but the crack stayed. I didn't sleep that night. I started digging into the mirror's history, the one I'd bought years ago. The internet gave nothing, only paranormal forums with people posting about cursed objects, sounding like cheap horror stories. I remembered the old woman from the flea market, her words, "It sees the truth." I found her address in old notes, a rundown house in the south side, grass poking through cracked asphalt. I drove there the next day, but the house was empty, windows boarded, door covered in cobwebs. An old newspaper lay on the porch, dated 10 years back. I left, feeling the shadow trailing me, its steps silent but present. I went back to my parents' house, not to save them, but to understand. The mirror pulled me, like a magnet to steel. The house was dark, light only in the living room where the mirror stood, draped in an old blanket like a shroud. Mom sat on the couch, hands trembling, eyes staring at nothing, her face gray as ash. Lindsay was in the corner, her phone shattered on the floor, screen cracked like her nerves. Emily was gone, her sneakers by the door, but the house felt empty, without her voice. Dad sat in his chair, his beer untouched, the bottle sweating like his forehead. I pulled off the blanket. The mirror was intact, but it didn't reflect the room. It showed them, Lindsay, Mom, Dad, laughing at me on my birthday. Their faces were distorted, like in a funhouse mirror, eyes gleaming like predators. Then me, standing on a cliff that didn't exist, black waves crashing below like oil. I felt a chill, like someone breathing on my neck. I turned. Nobody. But the mirror showed a shadow behind me, its eyes burning like coals, its silhouette growing, filling the room. Mom whimpered, her voice barely audible. "You did this." I shook my head, but words stuck in my throat. I didn't know what I'd done, but I knew this wasn't my fight anymore. I stepped toward the door, but Lindsay lunged, her nails digging into my arm, her eyes wild like a cornered animal. She screamed I had to take the mirror, that it was destroying them, that she saw the shadow every night. I yanked my arm free, her nails leaving red streaks on my skin. "This is your truth," I said, my voice cold as steel. I left them with the mirror, with their nightmare. Driving home, I felt the shadow trailing, heavy as wet snow. Months passed. I stopped answering calls, texts, letters. Lindsay lost her job. Their house faced foreclosure again. Bank letters piling up unopened. Mom wrote that Dad was sick, that Emily stopped talking, that she saw the shadow in her room every night, her drawings covered in black silhouettes. I didn't reply. I lived. For the first time, I cooked dinner without guilt, spaghetti with jarred sauce, but it tasted better than any restaurant meal. I walked Chicago's streets along Lake Michigan, waves crashing on rocks, wind carrying my thoughts away. I listened to street musicians in Millennium Park, their melodies sad, but hopeful. I was free. But the mirror didn't let go. I saw it in dreams, standing in my room, showing faces I didn't know, shadows that whispered, accused, laughed, their voices low like rustling leaves, saying, "You started this." One day, I found a note in my mailbox, written in unfamiliar handwriting, letters jagged like they were rushed. "It knows." I burned it in the kitchen, but the smell of charred paper lingered, clinging to the walls like a shadow. I noticed things at work. Colleagues avoided me, their glances wary, like they saw something behind me. My boss, Mark, asked if I was okay, his voice shaky, fingers fidgeting with a pen. I nodded, but I wasn't sure. The bathroom mirror cracked more, lines spreading like a web. Now it showed Lindsay, not Emily, her face twisted with fear, but her eyes smiling, like she knew something I didn't. I taped it up, but every morning the tape was gone, the cracks gleaming like veins. One day I went back to the warehouse. I don't know why. Maybe to end it. Maybe to face the shadow. The warehouse was the same. Empty, cold, smelling of rust and oblivion. The mirror was there, dusty, in a corner, like a forgotten sentinel. Its bronze frame was webbed with cobwebs, but the glass shone, like someone polished it. I looked into it. This time, it showed me, not a shadow, not a victim, but a man who was finally living. My eyes were clear, shoulders squared, a Chicago sunset behind me, crimson and gold, like a promise of freedom. I smiled, and I smashed it. The hammer from my trunk was heavy, its handle cold as ice. The glass shattered on the first swing, exploding like stars, each shard reflecting pieces of me, my past, my pain, my freedom. The sound wasn't glass. It was alive, a scream of pain and relief. I felt the shadow behind me dissolve, its presence fading like smoke. The shards lay on the floor, their edges glinting in my flashlight's beam, like tears. I walked away, leaving them. My family stopped reaching out. Their voices fell silent. I don't know what happened to them, and I don't care. I walked along Lake Michigan, waves crashing, wind carrying away the last shadows. I was free, and that was the truth. A year later, I moved to a new apartment downtown, on Lakeshore Drive, closer to the lake. My view, skyscrapers shining at night like beacons. My life got simpler, but richer. I started running mornings along the lake, the wind clearing my lungs. Bought a guitar, though I only play basic chords so far. I met a girl, Sarah, a barista at the corner cafe. She laughs at my jokes, her eyes warm as coffee, and she doesn't ask for anything but honesty. Sometimes I think about the mirror, what it showed me, not just their truth, but mine. I was a shadow because I let myself be one. Now I'm a man who lives. And that's enough. I walked through Millennium Park, the autumn wind carrying the smell of the lake and freedom. A street musician played saxophone, his melody sad but hopeful, like life after a storm. I tossed a 20 in his case and smiled. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. And that was the difference. What would you do in my shoes? Drop your thoughts in the comments.